Good afternoon, everyone. When we were in Cardiff last week, I felt I could legitimately welcome everyone to Cardiff. I think it would be presumptuous of me to welcome people to Leeds, so I'll confine myself by saying I'm very pleased to be here in Leeds, taking evidence in a location which is convenient to some of the people who wish to participate. Before we start, Mr. Page, who would be sitting on my right-hand side, is, I'm afraid, caught on a train between Sheffield and Leeds as I speak. And we're going to start, I think, with some reading in of summaries. But I don't think he will have arrived by the time that concludes, so that unless any of the legal representatives have any objection, I propose to hear the first witness in his absence. He will, of course, be able to watch it and read the transcript for himself. And I don't think that he will be disadvantaged in any way if that occurs, and that will ensure the smooth running of this afternoon's session. So the current plan is that we read in some summaries, then hear our first witness, and then take a break, by which time we're all hoping that Mr. Page will be present. Mr. Enright, are you going to read it? Thank you.
With your permission, Chair, your legal team has confirmed to me today that before you and them are the full witness statements of those whose summaries I'll be reading into the record today. So I start with Mr. Brian Skirrow. Mr. Skirrow was a sub-postmaster of Egremont Post Office in Cumbria from January 1998 to September 2015. Brian began experiencing shortfalls within around 6 months of Horizon system being implemented. Brian repeatedly contacted the helpline seeking assistance when a shortfall arose and was told to simply put the cash into the post office, which he always did because he didn't want the balance to be short. Feeling pressured by post office, Brian paid approximately £15,000 of his own money to account for the shortfalls. He used his savings, profits from the retail side of his business, and deductions from his salary to make good the shortfalls. Brian felt he had no alternative but to pay the shortfalls because he had to balance in order to be able to continue to trade the next day. Brian also thought that paying the shortfalls with his own money was the only way to avoid being prosecuted. Mr. Skirrow says, "I have always suffered from a guilt complex, and this was made worse with these losses. I knew they were not real. We were constantly second-guessing ourselves, and my wife was under a lot of pressure, having to double and triple check figures to try to find errors. This put a huge strain on my marriage. My wife and I would argue about the shortfalls and how we ended up in this situation. We knew the losses were not accurate, and so having to pay for shortfalls that were no fault of ours was very frustrating. I will never forget how the post office treated us and how they ruined mine and my family's life. We came out of the business in debt, unable to live the comfortable life we had planned for ourselves." So I turn to Mrs. Christine Cosgrove. Miss Cosgrove was a sub-postmistress of the Lance Lane Post Office in Liverpool from November 1997 to May 2002. Christine found the Horizon training inadequate and was told that it was the responsibility of sub-postmasters to interpret problems by themselves. Christine remembers that under the old paper-based system, she would have been able to investigate discrepancies. However, under the Horizon system, this was simply impossible. Sub-postmasters were told to trust the Horizon system by the post office. Ms. Cosgrove experienced regular shortfalls and was required to make good those shortfalls from her own money. The post office helpline and the post office auditors told her the fault must be hers, that there were and could be no errors with Horizon. Because of the shortfalls, Christine was subsequently suspended. Her contract was later terminated. Christine appealed the decision, but she was unsuccessful. Christine feels that she was let down by the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters who represented her. Christine says that her Federation representative did not say a single word in her defence. Christine and her husband suffered extreme financial hardship. Ms. Cosgrove and her husband attributed their ill health to the stress and trauma of the post office's conduct toward them. Christine says that the post office destroyed her life, their life and reputation, the same good reputation that the post office told her and her husband was so important when they interviewed them to run the post office. She says, "We lost our livelihood, our dreams of retirement, our hopes for our son's education. We just wanted a life that we could enjoy. All of our aspirations disappeared overnight. To this day, 20 years on, there are some people who don't know what happened to us. It is a dark secret I feel that I have to hide. I will never get over it. And it is the psychological impact that has been the worst thing for me." So I turn to Colleen Ingram. Colleen Ingram was the sub-postmistress of Cockfield Post Office in County Durham between August 2002 and February 2016. Prior to running the post office, Ms. Ingham had worked for the police as an administrative officer. She ran the post office with her husband, a retired Metropolitan Police officer. The couple chose the post office in a rural area because, after a period of serious ill health, Ms. Ingham's husband was advised to change his lifestyle. After training on the Horizon system that she considered completely inadequate, Ms. Ingham began to experience shortfalls and called the post office's helpline for assistance. No assistance was offered. Ms. Ingham was often told to simply ignore the problems she was experiencing. On one occasion, after a shortfall appeared, Ms. Ingham called the helpline and they went through a step-by-step procedure which doubled the shortfall. Ms. Ingham experienced regular and significant shortfalls which the post office decided were her responsibility, arising from error, and deducted the sums of the shortfalls from Ms. Ingham's salary. Ms. Ingham's branch was eventually closed as part of the network transformation scheme. During the 14 years Ms. Ingham was a sub-postmistress, she struggled financially due to having to make good the shortfalls. Ms. Ingham blames the behaviour of the post office for the strain her and her husband were put under, which led to her husband turning to alcohol. Ms. Ingham's reputation suffered, and she suffered with depression and anxiety. Colleen concludes in this way: "The post office and Department of Business who own it have known for years that Horizon was a broken system. I believe they knew, or should have known, when they were destroying my life and the lives of others, that their Horizon system was unreliable. I would like compensation, not just for the financial losses, but also to take account of the loss of the life I had and should have had. I would like them, Post Office Limited, publicly held to account and shamed in the way I and my family have been." So I will now read a summary from an anonymous witness, a witness who granted anonymity.
Yes.
I will refer to the witness as 208. The witness, 208, was a sub-postmistress of New Boston Post Office from June 2011 to June 2016. She also ran a general store and a bakery at the branch. In 2011, the witness started to experience shortfalls. She was assured by the post office helpline that they would be sorted out centrally. The witness also was told by Glenn Cheshire, the post office regional manager, that he did not believe that the problem lay with the witness or her husband. In 2016, the witness received a letter in which the post office alleged that she owed a central debt of £31,494.56. A payment plan was put in place for deductions from the witness's wages. She had no say in this, and the post office deducted the money without her consent. During an audit in April 2016, auditors took the witness's keys, put all the money in the safe and told her that she would not be allowed to re-enter her premises. The witness's previously supportive regional manager suspended her with immediate effect. The witness was told by the post office investigator that she might be prosecuted. 3 months later, her contract was terminated. The witness's retail business and bakery revenue fell dramatically as a result of the loss of the post office. She was forced to close the business and became unemployed. People in the community spread rumours that she had stolen from the post office and that she was in prison for theft. The witness's grandson was teased in his primary school. The witness says that everything was taken from her. She had to move out of her house as she could not afford the rent. The impact of Horizon and the post office's treatment drove the witness to attempt suicide. She was prescribed antidepressants, and her grandson now lives with her, as her son does not want her to live on her own. The witness says, everything was taken from me. She considers that the years between 2012 and now have been an unending period of increasing poverty, sadness, and stress. The witness was treated like a criminal. She states that what happened to me and others was done by the post office, a government organisation. It cannot be allowed to go unpunished. So I turn to Mrs. Janet Bradbury. Janet Bradbury was the sub-postmistress of Clune Post Office between September 2003 and May 2009. Janet had a background in finance and was the finance officer of a school. She and her husband decided to move away from the city to a more rural area where they could raise their family. They decided that running a post office would be perfect for them. Janet and her husband used the equity in their home to buy the post office. Janet received 5 days of classroom training and 2 days of in-branch training on the Horizon system before taking on her role as sub-postmaster. Janet found the training to be inadequate. She was told by a trainer to open a separate account in her own name into which she should transfer any discrepancies that arose. Having a finance background, Ms. Bradbury did not follow this advice, as she knew that this would be improper and potentially illegal. Janet would call the helpline regularly, particularly on balancing days. Helpline staff rarely answered her calls, and when they did, would not sort out discrepancies. The shortfalls increased significantly following the installation of an ATM machine in 2003. Multiple shortfalls occurred over the years. Janet would request that the post office come to investigate. She did everything she could to try to solve the problems with Horizon. Despite this, the post office held her responsible for the shortfalls. She had to use her own money to make good those shortfalls. Janet and her husband decided to move the post office into more modern premises, hoping that the newer wiring would solve the problems with the Horizon system. However, the shortfalls continued. Janet continued to make up the shortfalls, and the post office took the money directly from her salary. Janet felt forced to resign in March 2009 as she could no longer cope with the stress of the shortfalls and the increasing financial strain. Janet could not find a buyer for the business, and in the end sold the goodwill of the business for a peppercorn price of £1. The post office chased her for the shortfalls, and she received letters before action in 2011, the final one demanding £10,522. Janet found the letters very threatening. Janet felt forced to move away from the area with her daughter. She had used all of her savings to pay the shortfalls, and her husband had to use money from his pension pot, which he resented, causing a rift that could not be healed. Janet says that, "I have no financial security for me or my family. The experience has caused me years of stress and brought on ill health. I am very unwell, and my health is deteriorating as a result of the stress that the post office caused. I have huge concerns about how my daughter will cope if anything happens to me, as she has no security because the post office took everything from us." So I turn to Mr. John Valentine. John Valentine was the sub-postmaster at Plattbridge Post Office in Wigan between 1981 and 2002. Mr. Valentine used the paper-based accounting system for almost 20 years prior to the introduction of Horizon and experienced no major problems. After the introduction of the Horizon system, Mr. Valentine contacted the post office helpline 2 to 3 times a month in the early stages, owing to regular and repeated shortfalls. The helpline were of little help and would say that the Horizon system would right itself, and if not, he was told he must make good the shortfalls. Mr. Valentine distinctly remembers being told by the helpline that he was the only one who had such problems. Mr. Valentine made good the shortfalls when they occurred. An audit in 2002 discovered a supposed shortfall of £15,000. A follow-up audit 2 days later saw this reduced to £900. Nevertheless, he was suspended. A short time later, his contract was terminated despite 21 years of service. A temporary sub-postmaster was appointed to run the branch, but Mr. Valentine was still liable for the rent on the premises, despite having no income. He lost the value in the business and the investment he had made into refitting the premises. Prior to the issues with Horizon, Mr. Valentine's business was worth between £180,000 and £200,000. Mr. Valentine recalls that he spent endless hours searching for apparently missing money. He was constantly stressed and anxious. He lost hours of sleep and lost valuable family time. He became withdrawn and depressed and considered taking his own life. He felt the stigma of being accused of stealing from the Post Office Limited and also fell into debt. He blames the Post Office for the downward spiral of events. He states, "I became withdrawn and depressed. I considered taking my own life on a couple of occasions. I was paranoid, thinking my staff were stealing. I became suspicious and turned into a person I barely recognize. I felt I had failed at my job. I was treated like a criminal. My business was destroyed, my finances ruined, my mental health suffered, as did my pride. The Post Office action against me devastated my life." And finally, sir, I'd like to read a summary in relation to Ms. Moira Hegarty. Moira Hegarty was the sub-postmistress of the Limeside Post Office in Oldham from January 2012 until June 2015. Ms. Hegarty had previously worked as a Crown employee for the Post Office. She was promised 2 weeks of training on the Horizon system prior to taking up her role as sub-postmistress, but found the training to be sporadic and only covered basic transactions. Ms. Hegarty requested further training, but this was denied. Ms. Hegarty sought help from the Post Office helpline when she was unable to balance the Horizon system. Moira was often put on hold for an hour by the helpline and then advised to reboot the system or simply reverse transactions. This advice often increased the loss. When Moira questioned the helpline on the system, she was told the Horizon system cannot make errors. Ms. Hegarty paid more than £5,000 in shortfalls. She resigned when the Post Office approached her under the Network Transformation Scheme. Moira felt that she was forced out of her branch by the Post Office as a result of the demands she considered unrealistic. Well, for example, the Post Office tried to insist the store should remain open 365 days a year. With no support, with continuing shortfalls and being treated with contempt, Moira felt she had no option but to resign. Ms. Hegarty was forced to sell the business at a loss, losing a significant amount of money. Ms. Hegarty blames the Post Office for a decline in her relationships. Moira's working life and trying to run a business at a loss had a negative impact on her physical and mental health. Moira underwent counselling for feelings of failure and low self-esteem. She believes that she would still be running a successful business, which she intended to do until retirement, had the Post Office admitted to the mistakes with the Horizon accounting system. She states about this period, "I had zero quality of life, as every waking minute was spent at work, trying to find out what was going wrong. I began to neglect everything. This was on my mind every second of the day." Moira states, "My dreams of running my own business were shattered. I was made to question my abilities, my actions. I was left feeling isolated and risked being branded as a criminal." Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Enright. And are you and your client content that we proceed in the fashion that I suggested we would?
May I check just one moment?
Please, of course. Thank you very much, Mr. Enright. Over to you then, Ms. Hodge.
Thank you. Give
Shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hello.
Hello, Ms. Williams. As you know, my name is Catriona Hodge, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please, can you state your full name?
Heather Sarah Williams.
You made a statement, Ms. Williams, on the 27th of January of this year. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
And I can see you have a copy of that statement in
I
front
do,
of you.
yes.
Could you please turn to the final page? Do you have it there? Do you see your signature there?
I do.
Have you read the statement again since it was made?
I have.
Is the content true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is, yes.
Thank you. I'm going to begin by asking you a few questions about your career at the post office. When did you first start working for the post office?
In 1985, straight from school, I started as a YTS.
Forgive me, as a...
A YTS.
And what's that, please?
It's a youth training scheme where we were paid £25 a week to do 3 or 4 days in the post office and 2 days at college a week. And they pay for our lunches, our bus fares, everything like that as well.
You've explained you took that up on leaving school. How old were you?
16.
16. In which branches did you work as part of the scheme?
Dacre Hill in Rock Ferry.
And thereafter?
And then I moved to Liverpool to Park Lane. And then I moved to Woodchurch Lane in Prenton because it was a bit closer to home. Then I went to Upton Post Office in Upton in Wirral. That's where I learnt to drive. Then a job opportunity come down from the next post office. They were looking for a relief manager. So I applied for that and I got the job. I was 22. And, sorry,
Not at all. What is a relief manager? Could you
I
explain?
used to
please?
go around and make sure that if staff rung in sick or there'd been an armed robbery or anything like that, somebody had been stealing, I'd go in and help find out what the problem was and get the post office up and running again.
And by whom were you employed as a relief manager?
It started as Martin's and then 4 Boys bought it out and it was classed then as TM Retail.
For how long did you work for TM Retail?
That I can't remember, I'm sorry.
That's fine. Why did you decide to apply to become a sub postmistress?
I'd got friendly with one of the counter clerks in one of the offices, and we became partners. So rather than me travelling backwards and forwards from Birkenhead, she lived in Runcorn. So I went to live with her, and I'd had a nasty accident one day coming back from Clanroost post office, and I severed back injuries. And after that, I thought the driving is a bit too much now, because I was travelling all over the country. Some days I could be down in Worcester, so I'd have to leave at 5 in the morning and get home like at 9, 10 o'clock that night to be told, oh, you're back there tomorrow. So it was a long journey. It was like some days 6, 7 hours before I'd even done a full day's work.
Do you recall when you were first appointed as a sub-postmistress?
I do. I was approached by Glenn Chesters and Colin Brown, and they said there was a post office come available in Elton. It's been trying to be sold for quite a while, but there've been some bad armed robberies and hostage situations there. So then I was a tough person, you know, nothing frightened me. I'd take on the world. And we decided we'd go for that one. So I tried to get a mortgage to buy the property, but no banks or anything would give me the money off my house because of the armed robberies. It wasn't a safe office. So I had to go through. I'm sorry, I struggle with words and everything.
You take your time,
Okay.
Miss Williams.
Somebody that helps you get a mortgage when you can't get one.
Is that a broker?
Yes, that's the word, yes, thank you. And he arranged it, so we sorted all that out, and me and my partner took over the post office, and it was run to the ground. There was a massive hole in the ceiling in the kitchen where the last robbers had got through. It was all scorched and burnt around. So when we took over it, we had a lot of things that we were told to do, like new carpets, new front signage. I had to get that ceiling fixed before our parents come in and saw it. Otherwise, they would have said, oh, no, you're not working here. Because that was always our fright, that if the kids come in and saw that, or our parents, it'd put them off. But it was a lovely village, absolutely lovely.
Just going back then to cover a few points you've raised. You've explained you were approached to take on the Elton Post Office. Was it in and around May 2001 that your appointment took effect?
Yes, 29th of May.
You've also explained taking on a loan to purchase the branch. Do you recall how much the branch cost?
I think it was dropped down to 47 or 49,000, plus then there was stock, which there was no stock, but we didn't know because we weren't allowed in the premises.
And what did you pay for the stock?
That I don't know, I can't remember, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Not much, only about 1,000, something like that, maybe 1.5.
You've also described carrying out renovations to the property. You've explained in your statement you spent more than £4,500 doing that. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Can you please describe the business which you ran from the premises?
It was a cards and stationers shop. So when we first took over, we had to fill it with everything because there was just nothing in there. So that was also expensive to get the shop up and running so that it looked nice, welcome the customers back, because people would rather bypass their own village post office and go 3 miles down the road to the next post office rather than using that one. But we turned it round and, you know, we got them all back because we liked humour. You know, we had these quirky sayings to people and that, and people loved it. And, like, they'd come in just to chat to us when we weren't busy and tell us the life stories and everything. It was brilliant. But the post office ruined it.
But you enjoyed your work
I loved
as a
it.
sub-postmistress. What salary did you receive from the post office for running the Elton branch?
It started, I think, about 31,000, and then it went up to about 39, maybe 40, I think was the highest. And then when they got rid of like the pensions and things like that, the salary just dropped. When they changed over postage stamps to labels, you didn't have enough time. If you've got like 10 people coming, it was quicker to put it through the system and then put the stamps on as soon as you could. But when you had to do the labels, that was just slowing us down because people were coming in with like 50 packets.
And what sort of income were you receiving from the retail side of the business, do you recall?
It could range from 250 to 500 a week.
And that's
We done quite well,
yeah.
yeah, for a little office.
Was the Horizon system already installed
No.
in the Elton branch?
No,
When was it first installed in the branch? Do you recall?
I can't remember, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We know you took over in around May 2001.
Yes,
Was it shortly thereafter, do you think, or some time later?
I think it was. I think it was the June or the July, because I know that then my wife she'd already been trained, the official training, as where I hadn't. So I had to go off for the training, which was like 1.5 days in Bolton, and that was it.
Had you had any experience of using the system, the Horizon system, before your appointment
Yes.
as a sub-postmaster?
Yes.
When had that been?
When I was doing relief work, certain officers had it, so I had to be trained and ready to go in at the drop of a hat and take over.
You've just said you received some further training when you were appointed. You've described that in a centre in Bolton initially for a day and a half. What did that training cover?
Reversals, and like a balance technique, which didn't make sense. Because at the time, the company that I was working for, they couldn't finish their balance until a Thursday because of the lottery, because it didn't shut down until 7:30. So their takings, the post office was already balanced and shut. So it was all confusing. So then when I had to learn this other way, it was hard in some things, but other things it was fine.
Did you receive any testing before your training was completed in the centre?
Yes, we had to do a test.
How did you do?
Okay, we weren't allowed to leave until we passed.
Did you receive any on-site training after your training in Bolton?
Well, the day that we were to go, that's it, I'm sorry, the day we were to go live, the night before, we'd had a break-in and they'd smashed the whole of the front door in, the front window in, and they come in and they broke open the ATM's doors, and then smashed all my cameras off the walls and left. So the shop was smashed to bits, and that was that time. So we got it up and running again. We got no training then because the trainer that was due to come in the next day, we couldn't do anything because we had to get the auditors in to do an audit on the branch. So the training was cancelled, so we had to go live by ourselves. And I kept asking for some help to come down. Could somebody come down? And we got half a day training, which was on the phone most of the time anyway, talking to other branches, helping them.
What were you told? You've just explained someone did come down to your branch, I think for about half a day, you've said.
Yes.
What were you told to do if you experienced problems with the system?
Ring the helpline.
What was your impression of the adequacy of the training that you received from the post office?
Horrendous. Horrendous. It was a case of get in there, pick it up and learn it yourself.
Did you seek any further training from the post office?
No,
on that, right?
never. I asked for help with audits and things when the money was going missing, but they still didn't help.
When did you experience your first shortfall on the Horizon system?
I think the first loss, I think, was in 2002, 2003. But, sorry, just before the first loss, we just had the same break-in this time, but they come in with an axle grinder or whatever they use and broke into the ATM again, sawed it open and took the cash machines out. So that time we lost over 72,000, I think it was. So then again, we had to work on the shop to get it all done because they cut the wires, they cut everything, the phone lines. We had no security in the office. Some days we had up to 12 people working on the shop to put it right. Get the post office up and running again. They wouldn't let us open because we're not having security on the place and because of the bad reputation it had. So that was the first robbery that took place there. And that was absolutely destroying. Again, after we just repaired it after it had just been broke in. But the police seemed to think the first time it was to take pictures.
So can I be clear?
Yes.
You told me about there being a break-in the night before you were due to have your training.
Yes.
And do I take it from what you just said that a lot of damage was done but nothing was stolen?
Yes.
Right. And then sometime after that, a lot of money was stolen.
Yes. The same thing happened.
Right. And can you just give me, only approximately, the kind of time interval between
Couple
those
of
two
months.
events? Couple of months.
Yes.
All right. Fine.
2 or 3 months, no more than that.
Right. So these two events took place right at the beginning of your stewardship of
Yes.
that post office?
Yes.
Fine. Okay, thank you.
You've explained quite a substantial sum of money was stolen at the time of the second break-in. How was that resolved with the post office?
They just wrote it off. It was just in, like, the suspense account for a few months and then it just disappeared.
Do you recall experiencing any shortfalls in your accounts
Yes.
around this time?
Yes. Straight after, we started losing money, and there was a lady there, her name was Sue Higginson, I think, was the area manager at the time. And because we'd had all these people in working on the safe, working on the electrics, she said, don't worry about it. I'll make sure that this is written off by the post office. And she said that to me and my wife at the time. And then the next thing, she's gone. She's been, took redundancy. And that's when, I think it was Glenn Chester's come in at that time. And he said, no, it's a shortage. It's lost in your branch. You have to pay it. So we ended up doing when we had to pay it monthly. So as soon as we'd finished the £2,000 one, the next one straight away was 3,000. It seemed to overlap. Not just 2,000, it'd be 2,000 and something or 3,000 and something. And you're pulling yourself to pieces, wondering where it was. So we paid it all back each time. The amounts kept going up and up. I kept asking for the auditors to come in, but they wouldn't send them. Then I had a lovely lady called Karen Vernon Harris, and she was my new area manager. And with her, we won awards, we won prizes for a little tiny branch that we were. We were winning Crown offices in these competitions because I was pushing and pushing, and we done it, and we made it. And she was brilliant. She was so nice. She pushed you, she helped you on along the way, she encouraged you to do things, and then she got transferred elsewhere, and that's when Glanchester's come back into it, and that's then when things started going downhill.
So just to clarify then, so relatively shortly after you took over, the robbery occurred,
Yes.
where a substantial sum of money was stolen, and then you had two shortfalls, relatively significant ones in the region of £2,000 and £3,000.
Yes.
Is that right? And what you've explained is that you were told at the time you wouldn't have to make those good.
No, that's when the First Lady, Sue Higginson, she said that because of what had gone on and everything else, that would be written off by the post office. Because I couldn't have ears and eyes everywhere with all these people in and out.
And you've explained thereafter you had quite a successful period of running the post office. Is that right?
Yes and no, because these amounts just like appeared from nowhere. But when the ATM machine was fitted in, I think that was in 2003, we noticed that the post office had been balancing all week. But when the ATM was rolled over into the post office, even though the ATM balanced, all of a sudden there was a shortage there. And we couldn't find it. We'd ripped the place to pieces. We'd be there after 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Romek used to ring me and tell me to shut the safe at 8:30. I said, I need a little bit more time. I said, I've got a lot to do. So they kept ringing me, shut the safe, and that was an ongoing thing on balance night. And then getting back there 6 o'clock the next morning on the Thursday. I'd have to go in first, and then my wife would follow with our youngest child and take her and put her in school and come into work and try and help me find stuff. But there was nothing. There was not a penny discrepancy from what we'd entered into the system.
If I can just clarify one point, you mentioned experiencing problems when a cash machine was installed. You recall that being in around 2003.
Yes.
I just want to check with you, because in your statement you've estimated it was approximately 2008, and I just wondered if that...
I'm not, to be quite honest, I've not really thought about looking into that bit, because I knew I'd written it down, but I couldn't remember because with all the stress and everything else that had been going on, I suffered a stroke. And
it doesn't matter which year the cash machine was installed,
Yeah.
all right? But what I would like you to confirm, if it's correct, is that you started to have problems with shortfalls after that ATM was installed.
well,
Is that right?
before.
Before and after?
Yes, both.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
Did you take steps to notify the helpline?
Straight away, but it took like over an hour sometimes to get through on the Wednesday night. Or they'd say, OK, I'll just check, and the phone would go dead. And then you'd have to start again, and that's why we were there so late. And then I think the helpline at one time shut, I think at 8 o'clock. Well, that's no good for us when we had the lottery and we weren't closing until 7:30 at night. So the only help we could wait for is 8 o'clock the next morning. And they'd tell you to do something and you'd do it their way, and the next thing the figure would double. And she'd say, oh, just wait for an error notice to come through. That was always the case, an error notice will come. Just put it in the suspense account and we'll sort it out. But then I get Glanchester's in then saying, no, you've got to pay it back. So again, it was arranged that we'd pay it back on a monthly basis, and it was always taken out of my salary. Can I just add one thing about the system? One day I was serving a customer and she came in for a car tax, and I'd scanned it all, bleeped it, and it come up £170 on the system. As I pressed to pay and to finish, she put a credit card in and it come up that showed me £340, even though there was only one transaction on the thing, it had doubled. So if I hadn't have noticed, that poor lady would have had another 170 taken out of her bank account, and there was no explanation for that, nothing whatsoever. And I kept all the receipts, all the reversals, everything, but I wasn't allowed back in the branch when I was finished up. So I've got no records. We had diaries of things. I didn't get anything, nothing at all.
All of those records have been retained in the branch, is that right?
I don't know where they are.
Forgive me, at the time that
Yes.
you left the branch,
Yes,
all the
yes.
records have been there?
Yeah.
You've explained in relation to the shortfalls, you sought some help from the helpline. Did you also approach your area manager at the time?
Yes, plenty of times.
And what advice did you receive?
Just a negative thing, just a negative attitude all the time. There's nothing we can do. You're losing the money, you have to pay the money back. And I knew that we weren't losing the money, and it sends you mad, because I'm thinking, well, what mistakes am I making? What mistakes is my wife making? I'm not stealing, and she'd never steal a penny in all her life. So where was the money going to? And they just didn't want to know. So in the end, when all these amounts kept going up and up and up, we used my father's bit of inheritance money that we got. My ex-wife's father's inheritance, we had to put that in straight away as well. I'd had a car crash, and it was ongoing for years, so we had a shortage of 14,000, so we didn't have any money left. You know, we'd paid everything that we had out. We were rowing all the time, arguing. I changed personalities. I became nasty. I couldn't cope. I couldn't cope with it all. So then we had the 14,000 loss. So I had to ring the solicitors and say, I'll settle out of court. And I got 15,000. So we had to put that in by the next month. But what amazes me is, whenever I was short in the branch, I had 30 days to start making that money either good, paying it back in full, or doing a monthly contract. And we were sick of doing monthly contracts, so that's when we got the bigger payments. We could pay it off. But why would we want to steal our own money? It just didn't make sense. And I kept ringing, asking for auditors to come in, check to see what we're doing wrong, if I missed something out. When I worked for TM Retail, one of my closest friends was my area manager, Sheila Connick, and she even came across to the branch to help me to go through things, and everything was spot on. Because you think, what am I missing? It really does send you mad. And in the end, I just couldn't cope anymore. It was just too much, losing everything.
You've described paying some quite significant sums of money to cover shortfalls shown on Horizon.
Over 60,000.
In total?
Yeah.
After you've referred to a shortfall of £14,000.
Mm-hmm.
In your statement, you've explained that occurred in October 2013.
Yes.
Does that sound correct?
Yes, yeah.
After you experienced that shortfall, you asked for an audit of your branch. Is that right?
Yes.
To whom did you make that request?
To the helpline and also Glenchester.
When did the audit take place?
It didn't. Nobody came. Nobody came at all. And then home life was absolutely horrendous. Nobody wanted to live with me. Things just deteriorated completely. Everything went wrong. Everything we'd worked hard for. The 30 years service that I put in just snatched away because nobody would say, oh yes, there is problems in the system. And in the end, I said to them, if you don't get the auditors in, I'm going to the press. And I was told, you can't do that because of the Official Secrets Act. You're not allowed to talk to anyone. So you were under a lid in a barrel. So you couldn't speak to anyone about it. So where'd you go? When you know, I was never threatened with court or being sacked or anything. I was just asked for the money back each time because they knew that I was good at my job, and I knew that the experience I'd had over the years, I wasn't stealing money. My wife wasn't stealing the money. So the system was stealing the money, but nobody had owned up to it. And everyone that came, even the auditors, they were all finished up on redundancy then.
I'd like to ask you about an audit in May 2014.
Yes.
Do you recall that?
I do.
Who conducted that audit?
Oh,
You've mentioned the name in your statement of Paul Fielding.
yes.
Correct.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, was the date 2014 or 13?
May 2014. I
14,
believe.
fine.
yes.
Yeah.
What happened when Mr. Fielding attempted to reconcile the cash machine balance and your office balance?
The ATM balanced, my office balanced. When we pressed to do the trial balance, it come up as 21,000 and something short, and I nearly dropped dead on the floor. I said, that's not gone. I said, that's got to be here. So we ripped the place to pieces. We done another full balance, but it stayed the same figure. But when we pressed for the final balance to come out, it come out as 29,000 something. So why did it jump from that to that to that? And there was no explanation for it. Everything was bang on for the cash that I'd declared, the stock that I declared, everything was perfect. But for some reason, it was like as if as soon as the ATM rolled over, it was like as if we thought it was the ATM at one time that was causing the problems. But it wasn't, it was Horizon itself. There was a glitch in that system, and they knew, and they kept taking our money off us and making us broke and paupers. Well, they're all living in the big houses with everything else. And it's like a stab in the back of them. Paula Reynolds even rung me one day to congratulate me on winning an award. And I think, how two-faced is that? You knew what was wrong, and you let us all. People have died. I've tried to commit suicide. It's wrong what they've done.
Can I ask you, please, about how Mr. Fielding responded when you both saw this discrepancy appear?
Yes, we left there at 10 o'clock at night, and he took every bit of paperwork home with him. We had 2 copies of the trial balance, 2 copies of the final balance. So he took a set, and I kept a set in the office in case the auditors come in the next day. And that was on the Wednesday, and he rung to say that he's working on it at home. And then we got a phone call on the Monday to say that he'd worked on it all weekend. Himself was an auditor. His wife was an area manager at the time for the post office as well. And he'd asked his neighbour across the road, who was an accountant, to come in and help him. And they all sat at the kitchen table trying to sort out why this money had gone from 21,000 to 29,000, no explanation for it. And he was there and he said, I don't believe what I've just seen. And then a couple of weeks later, we find out that Paul's gone. He's took redundancy, him and his wife. But he knew that I was right. It wasn't us that was stealing the money. It was the post office system that was taking the money off us. How come that everyone that I'd had there was made redundant after doing an audit? Just doesn't seem right.
What happened to the discrepancy that was discovered on the date of that audit?
It was still sat in the suspense account. Nothing, the post office didn't even try to say, I've got to pay that money back. Nobody approached me at all over paying that money back. And like sleepless nights, didn't come into it. Just didn't come into it.
About 6 months after your branch was audited in May 2014, you were broken into again, is that right?
Yes, on the 3rd of December.
What happened on that occasion?
Can I start from when things started going wrong that week? On the Monday, with it being the first week in December, they'd said that they were going to send in over 100,000. Well, we didn't need that much. So they sent in, I think they were trying to send in 150,000, something like that. So I got it down to 105. So that was due in on the Monday. And then on the Monday night, most of that was transferred then into the ATM once we closed at night. And we do that together. Sorry, I didn't mean to mention that name. My wife would do the paperwork side and I'd do the cash side in counting.
Would you just hold on a second? If you don't want that name published, we can do something about that.
Please,
all right?
yes.
Yeah, fine.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. We'll see to that. So sorry to have interrupted you. I think you were telling us that a very large amount of cash had been put into the ATM.
Yes, it had.
Right, so carry on from there.
But it hadn't gone in on the Monday because the REM didn't arrive, which is the money that comes in. It's classed as the REM. He'd locked the safe in the van with all our stock and money in. So I said, well, I'm by myself tomorrow because me and my wife were going through a divorce then. And they promised that it'd be in before 10 o'clock, so I could count it, close for half an hour at lunch because we never closed, with it being a large amount, and get it all away, put into the bottom cell where it was safe. And it didn't come in till 5 o'clock on the Tuesday night, the same time as the postman, which Christmas time we had about 14, 15 letter bags going out as well. As he's trying to bring the money in, the postman was trying to get the mail out. It was horrendous. I had bags of money everywhere, which were then booked in and just thrown into the safe room because I didn't have time to sort everything. So as soon as he dropped all the money off and the postman had took all the mail, it was about 5:10 at night and I closed. And that was on the Tuesday. So all I'd done was open the safe and threw it all in, just in the bags. I didn't even open the bags until the next day, until my ex-wife come back in to help me with the balance and to sort the ATM out. Because since I had the stroke, it left me with a short-term memory, or trying to explain things that, or understanding words that I should know, but I can't explain them. And so it was all, I've done it again, I'm sorry.
Don't worry. Can I just say that if that name is spoken every time, please delete it from the video and
Thank you.
transcript.
Where was I up to? I'm sorry.
Forgive me. So you were explaining that.
Oh, the ATM. So because I had a short-term memory and they had to change the password numbers and everything, that was her job. I run the post office, she looked after the ATM, and we done the balances together. And that's how we worked. And we worked as a good team normally. But because of all these losses, we couldn't cope with our family life. We had a big house, we had teenagers at home, we had a younger child at home. And as you know, kids aren't cheap these days, are they? School uniform was £500 just to start the little one off. So left, and I was left with the house and the post office, and she kept screaming at me, you know, it's caused all these problems, sell it, get rid of it, get rid of it. And I said, but what am I going to do? That's my career. And she said, I don't care, sell it, because I need somewhere to live. So...
Can I just take you back a little bit? You were starting to tell us about the events leading up to another robbery or break-in. In December.
Yes, I'm sorry, yes.
That's all right.
So
you tell us about that.
Yes,
now.
sorry, we'll go back. We finished the Tuesday when I'd locked the safe early and everything else. On the Wednesday, she'd have come in, I'd counted all the money, I'd transferred a lot of the money that belonged to the post office and some to the ATM in the bottom cell. And the money that we were going to put into the ATM that night, because it wasn't the main balance night, because it should have gone in on the Wednesday, we had something like 120,000 to go in, but I couldn't get it all in, so that's why some of it went back into the safe. So I was a parish councillor at the time. She had an emergency meeting, so as I was filling up the ATM with everything else, there was a knock on the door about 6:10, I think it was, and I looked through the door and I thought, that's a postman back. I bet you he's lost his keys again and he's looking for his keys. So as I opened the door, I've got a card stand here and card display there. So the door opened that way. So as I opened it slightly and I said, well, have you forgot something like that? He pushed the door open, knocked me back into the thing, and he had a gun. And all I could see was this toggle. And he went into the safe room, give me the money, I want all the money. And I'd already put 40,000 in one of the ATM boxes that was right by his feet, and I didn't tell him. I didn't say there's money there. By the time I put the money that was ready to go in the other boxes, was shaking and the punches and everything else. Money had scattered all over the place, and then he kept hitting me and hit me. Open that, open that. I said, I can't open that. I said, it doesn't open for 35, 40 minutes. You're lying. So he'd punch me again. Then he slammed the safe door into my head as I was down trying to put the money into the sack. And then when he knocked me, I fell back and I hit my back against the door frame, my whole spine. And my neck took such a wallop there as well, going back, because I was a big girl still at that time. And going back in that force really hurt me. And as he was leaving, there was no lights on in the shop. The only lights that was on was behind the post office counter, because I didn't want anyone to see me working in the safe room, which was separate. So there was enough light coming from the counter side to shine through for the safe room, so I didn't need to put the light on in there. So not only had I managed to save the money that was in the safe, and the 40,000 right by his foot. And as he left, he said, "Don't be calling," and what was he said? He said something, and he said, "I know where you live. Can that be blocked out as well, please?" And that frightened me, because I thought, how does he know where I live? I was there by myself. I was petrified. I had a broken nose. I had black eyes for over 3 months. Then that's what happened that day.
Yeah, fine.
That was in December 2014, is
yeah.
that right? About 3 months later, in March 2015, you were suspended by the
Yes.
Post Office, is that
Yes.
right? What caused your appointment to be suspended?
Somebody had come in from the public that we know as a businessman. You know, he was friendly with us. We'd been friends with his daughter for years. And he said, "You can't open tomorrow." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "I've heard that there's going to be an armed robbery on your branch." So I said, "Don't be stupid." I said, "Don't be stupid saying things like that." I said, "You know how bad I'm suffering as it is? Because living at home and left by this time, left on the 13th of February, completely from the post office. So I was left alone to do it all." And then he comes in and says that to me. So he said, "Don't ring anyone." He said, "Don't bring it to attention." I said, "Of course I've got to." I said, "You don't do things like that." So when I got home, I phoned Karen Vernon Harris at the time. I didn't bother with Glenchester because he was just a waste of space. He was not interested in anything, that man. And she contacted the people that needed to be informed on the post office side. I phoned the police. So CID come out straight away. They took a statement and they said that they'd be back in the morning. Don't go to work. Just stay at home. We'll be here first thing in the morning. So I told them who had told me who it was that told me about this armed robbery. And straight away they said, "Right, you're arrested under conspiracy to rob the post office." And I said, "What?" And I was suspended on the spot because I think Glenchester's was there as well at the time. I can't remember that bit. I was suspended with no pay, but I was told that if it comes back that I wasn't involved in it, I'd get my full money back, my salary that I'd lost and everything else. But it was strange because the robbery, that happened on the Wednesday night. By the Friday, he had somebody to run the post office, and he said to me, "In order to keep your post office open and running, we're going to put this company in and they'll have your full salary." And I said, "Well, they'll have to pay all the bills." I said, "Because I've got nothing." I didn't know that I could get money off the dole. I was so embarrassed. I didn't want to leave the house. I was in such a mess. I was a complete wreck. And my neighbour across the road used to bring me food. He used to come down and sit with me and talk to me. I couldn't explain it. I wouldn't have done anything like that. He was a friend. We went to a Sky premiere night. It was horrendous what they accused me of after all the years. I knew he wanted me out Glenchester because I wouldn't open at 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night.
Just to be clear,
And that's one of the reasons that, you know, we were on a precinct. I had Martin's retail at one end and I had Spar at the other end. Both could fit the post office in, so they were both fighting for the post office. And I soon then went into hospital because I was struggling walking after having the knock on the spine. It affected my legs and everything. My legs swelled up, my body swelled up, and I went into hospital and I was there for a week and they learnt me how to walk up and down stairs. Then I was sent home, and then within 10 days I was rushed back into hospital with my ex-wife. My neighbour across the road was there, my doctor was there, and I went into this ward and I was hallucinating. I thought I could see people. Like, my mum had died and I thought I could see my mum in the bed opposite. And I'm like, why are you over there? Why aren't you over here with me? Other people I thought were, and I was shouting across this ward, and I don't remember none of it. The next thing, I believe, I was rushed into intensive care because I had bleeds everywhere. I had 2 hematomas the size of my fist, one on my spine and one on my kidneys. And they didn't know where all the blood was going out of my body. So they were pumping blood into me as that was filling up all these bleeds in my head. My head swelled like a football, wasn't recognisable. Twice I nearly died. And then when I come out of the second coma, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I was or anything. And I remember waking up and I could hear, Heather, come on, wake up now. And I woke up. And as I say, I didn't know who I was. I couldn't see hardly because my eyes, because of being so swelled, had all crusted over. I'd been ripping my hair out in the coma. So my fingernails were all full of blood. So when I finally got to see a bit better, I found a phone number. And it said this lady's name. I didn't know who she was. And I kept thinking, where's my mum? Where's my wife? Why am I here by myself? So the nurse dialed this number for me and I spoke down the phone. I said, hello, my name's Heather, do you know me? And she said, yes, love, I live across the road from you. I was your mum's best friend. And I didn't know. I thought my mum was still alive. I couldn't remember anything. And I've lost so much since that. It took me over 12. Then I was in hospital for 19 months. I had to learn to walk again. That took over 12 months to do. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. But I'd done it. And in that time, I'd lost my home. I'd had my interview with the post office. Even though I was in hospital, I had to go in a taxi down to one of the hotels in Liverpool, where I was interviewed by a panel. I also had an advocate working for me, which was helping me because with having these brain problems, I couldn't understand. I didn't know what was going on. So when we arrived, he was told he wasn't allowed to speak. He wasn't allowed to say anything. And I thought, well, why did you say he could come? You know the state that I'm in. Why are you putting more pressure on me? So they just said, you know, because the landlord hadn't been paid, his bill was nearly £10,000. So the landlord got in touch with me and he said, Heather, are you going back to the post office? Are you able to go back to the post office? And I said, no. I said, not at the minute. I said, I've only recently learnt to walk, let alone anything else. And he said, well, I'll give it another couple of weeks, but if you're coming back, let me know, and I'll wipe that full debt off for you because you've been such a good tenant. And I said no, I wasn't going back. So he had the locks changed immediately, because I was under the impression that company that took over was going to pay the bills out of the salary like I had to. But they paid for nothing. I didn't get anything out of the shop. I didn't get none of my personal belongings. Things in there that belonged to me. Nothing. I don't know who's got it, who's seen it, who's read my personal items. Then I was told by somebody that the lady that was running the post office there, she was having cigarette breaks and leaving the bandit screen door open, or sitting on a chair in the precinct in the sunshine when it was quiet with the bandit door screen open. And I'm being blamed for all this money going missing. And my security was high level. I never had a problem with security, apart from the passwords, because I couldn't remember them, and I'd write them down and I'd put them under my mat, so that every month when I changed it, I'd change it, and I'd just lift up that. Well, one day Glenn Chester's come and he saw that I had my password under my mat. I got a written warning for it. It was anything he could pick at me for. I'm sorry for babbling on, but I could go on for days over how I've been treated and everything.
I'm sure you could. I just wanted to get the time sequence right.
Yeah.
I've understood that all these very serious illnesses that you were suffering, and when you were hospitalised, that took place after you were suspended?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And during that period of time, you were first suspended, then you were terminated, and then you tried to appeal. That was the meeting in Liverpool you told me about.
That was, yes.
Yeah. And that appeal was unsuccessful.
It was just a waste of time going.
Fine.
It was a waste of money.
And after that, of course, you had nothing more to do with the post office.
No, I was told I couldn't enter the premises. I was to not go there.
Yeah.
And that
So
was it.
I've got it in sequence now, so Miss Hodge will ask you some more questions.
I'd like to talk to you about how this has affected you a little more. You've described some of that impact. You've explained that your landlord, I think, forfeited your lease. Is that right?
Yes.
On the branch. And as a result of your termination, you lost your post office branch. Is that
That
correct?
was the reason they shut it down, yes.
And what happened to your retail business?
But there was nothing left. I didn't get a penny. I wasn't allowed to enter the building. By this time, people were thinking, oh, she was robbed the post office and that's why she's disappeared. Nobody knew I was in hospital. Nobody knew. Because as my wife was driving one night to visit me, somebody was driving down the wrong side of a dual carriageway, racing home to watch a Liverpool football match, and crashed straight into her as a head-on. She broke her neck, her ankle, her arm, her leg, ribs, and she was smashed up to hell. And nobody told me. And I kept saying to the nurses, can you ring and find out where she is? And it was about a week after, because I thought, that's not her. She's been there all the time to look after me, because she knows that I'm innocent in everything. And when I found out about the crash, I couldn't believe it, because I felt it was my fault, because I was so poorly. If she didn't have to come and see me and bring me fresh clothes, nighties and things, that crash wouldn't have happened. And everyone in the family blamed me as well. The kids, the sisters, everyone. And then the post office, the police said, come back that no further charges were to be made against me for the robbery. I wasn't involved in it at all. And everything ceased then. So my advocate rung Glen Chester's and spoke to him because he was there. He was there when Glen Chester's had said, yes, we'll pay you all your salary back when the police say that you're not involved. But then they hit me then, as I say, with this landlord thing. But I wasn't well enough to go back. I'd come out of hospital after 19 months. I lost 5-bedroomed house, the post office. I moved into a council house. I've still got no flooring in my lounge or bedrooms. Most of my clothes are second hand because all my clothes went missing somewhere. And I can't survive on what I get. I can't live. It's not worth living.
Have you sought any compensation from the post office?
They paid 60,000 out, but when I first come out of hospital, the Post Office Federation gave me £3,000 to help me because they knew I wasn't involved in any robbery like that. I'd had a good, clean record all my life for the post office. And I come out and I had nothing. I moved into a 2-bedroomed semi-detached house and I'm a hermit in there. I don't like going out. If I do, I just go to the shop and come back. My sister died in December. That caused a big rift between the family and everything, so I've lost touch with all of them.
And the £60,000 compensation you've just told me about, that came from the civil litigation, did it?
Yes, it did.
Fine,
Yes.
fine, yeah.
How do you feel now about the way that you were treated by the post office and its employees?
They don't care about anyone. They knew that there was problems in there and they were the ones that were cashing in the money. They were the ones that were earning the millions of pounds a year. And there's us 30 days to pay the money back. Well, I've waited 20 years now for them to pay me and compensate me for what they owe me. The stress, losing my home, losing the business, losing my family, my wife, jewellery, stamp collections, coin collections, everything's gone.
What do you think the post office needs to do to put this right?
I'm a bit stuck on that one.
Okay.
Is this where I read my statement? Yeah, okay. I've made a statement. Is it okay to read?
Yeah, please do, please do.
I'm sorry, my dog's broke my glasses and I can't afford a new pair. So I'm a bit like off Coronation Street. Wednesday the 9th of March 2022 to Sir Win Williams. My final closing statement that I know needs addressing immediately is for the post office to compensate for all our life-changing situations and losses. The post office ruined my life, and when our officers showed huge shortages, we had a month only to find the money to sort out the loss. But yet you have had over 20 years and we still haven't been compensated for the glitch in the system that you all denied was happening. I lost my beautiful wife, my family, because it changed me completely. I lost my dignity, personality, and my soul in the end. My mental health is in a bad way. I felt I didn't matter when I asked for help until I was prepared to go to the press. Auditors that finally attended
were written within that month, paid off as redundancy. I think it's because he believed me. He watched as the figures of the balance changed in front of our eyes. So for all the loss and illness that this has caused, it's totally mentally cruelty, pushing me to a mental breakdown. Suicide, yes, I've been there. But do you know what? No more. No more. I'm entitled to live. As to what my declining health needs, I need a bungalow to survive. Otherwise, what's the point of living? I can't get upstairs in my house. That's it. Thank you, Sir Williams, for listening.
That's fine. And thank you very much for coming here under obvious difficulties and distress to give me your evidence.
I didn't think I'd cry. I thought it was tougher than that, but it's just too emotional.
People react in all kinds of different ways, so don't you worry about it. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
So we'll have a short break now. I'm sure Mr. Page is here by now. I suspect he's actually been listening to quite a bit of it in another room. And I see a wave from the back to suggest I'm right about that. So we'll have a 10-minute break and then start again when we're all ready.
Our next witness is Miss Janice Atwood.
Yes.
Just stand up, please. Repeat after me. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. Sit down.
As you know, Miss Atwood, my name is Catriona Hodge, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please, can you state your full name?
Yes, Janice Sandra Atwood.
Thank you. You made a statement on the 11th of January of this year, is that correct?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of that statement in
Yeah.
front of you? Could I ask you please to turn to the final page?
Yeah.
Do you see your signature at the top of that page?
Yes, I do.
Have you read the statement again since it was made in January?
Yeah.
Is the contents true to the best of your knowledge and
Yes.
belief?
Yes.
I'm going to begin by asking you a few questions about you. You currently live with your partner in North Yorkshire, is that right?
Yes.
Do you have any children?
Well, I've got 5.
And how old are they?
The youngest twins are 25, 36, 40 and 42.
So they're grown up?
Yeah.
Do they still live with you?
2 do.
What do you do now for a living?
I manage a cancer research charity shop.
Before working for the post office, you were employed as a civil servant, is that right?
Yeah, I worked, well, it was the DHSS then, yeah.
How did you first come to work in a post office branch?
I was married and I lived in the Isle of Man, and then when my marriage broke up, I came back next door to my parents who had the post office. And then when my father died, we took it over
Where was that post office?
in Helper Bay.
And that was run by your parents originally?
Yeah.
You worked for them?
I worked from about 1986. I used to do twice a week and then Saturdays sometimes if they wanted to go caravanning.
Assisting them in
Yeah, just
running the
anything to fit in
branch.
with the school time. Yeah,
And where were you living at that time?
next door to the post office.
You've just explained your father passed away, is that right?
Yeah.
And it was as a result of that that you applied to be the
Yeah,
postmistress?
we were having a baby and then it turned out to be twins, but we were looking for a house, and then when my father died he was still a postmaster, so we ended up buying the post office because my mother wasn't coping very well.
So when you say we, are you referring to your current partner?
Yeah, Ian and I.
Do you recall when you took over as the sub-postmistress of the branch?
It was September 1996.
I think you said your parents owned the branch. Did you purchase it from them at that stage?
Yeah, well, my father was a postmaster when he died, so my mother didn't want to carry on, so yeah, bought it from my mother.
How did you afford to do that?
We got a massive mortgage, well, massive for then, it was £120,000, and then that was on the basis of both our wages, you know, my post office wage and then Ian's wage to pay it back.
What steps did you take to modernise the branch when you took it over?
We had a sorting office as well, so there was 3 post ladies attached to the house, so we had to make a bulletproof screen, and we altered where the actual office bit was, because we had a shop as well. So yeah, with new screens, had to get a new lozenge for the outside, and I can't remember how much we spent on it, quite a bit.
You've mentioned a shop. The branch had a retail side to it, is that right?
Yeah.
What did you sell from the retail side?
We tried to do everything. We had fresh fruit and veg, fresh bakery every day. We got an off licence. Christmas trees, logs, just everything, papers, everything we could think of selling we did.
Did you live in the branch itself?
Yes.
There was a residential
Yeah, it's a big
part
house.
of the branch too.
Yeah.
You've explained you took over in September 1996. Do you recall when the Horizon system was installed in your branch?
I think it was 2000.
What training did you receive when Horizon was installed?
2 days at one of the hotels in Boroughbridge. And I think somebody came out just briefly to sort of go through it in the shop. And then we had a training mode in the back screen where you could practice, which I used to practice a lot on that.
What did your training cover?
It was really rushed. I remember it was really rushed. I don't even know if they did the balancing then. It was just basic transactions, and I don't know if we did reversals. I think we did. It was a long time ago, but
You've described it as rushed. What was your impression of how sufficient it was in preparing you to use the system?
I was better when it was in the post office. I remember the 2 older ladies there had village post office, and he was really grumpy with them because they'd never been anywhere near a computer before. But as far as I was really quite excited about it because I thought it'd be progressive.
Did you seek any further training from the post office after your, I think it was about 3 days you've described?
No, just I rang up if I had problems and people would talk you through it.
Did you have problems with the Horizon system?
I would have shortages. Before we would have like an envelope in the safe and either put the money in or take the money out. It usually balanced, but
When you say before, do you mean
before
Horizon?
Horizon, yeah. So that you'd sort of, if you'd made it, you know what I mean. If you kept the money in the safe, you take it out and put it in if you were short, and then if you were over, you put it in, and it all. I think pretty much everybody did that. But when the Horizon came, we just didn't have any. There were all seemed to be shortages, not big ones, little ones. Yeah.
And so before Horizon came in, you had occasional discrepancies.
Yeah, just
Some shortages,
yeah.
but some sort of
Yeah, it
gains,
balanced
so to
out really.
speak.
Yeah.
But you felt they roughly evened out.
Yeah.
What did you do when you experienced the shortages?
Well, ring helpline lots, and then end up putting the money in.
How often do you think you contacted the helpline?
Just loads. Just especially balance days. I was constantly on the phone to them on balancing days because I could never balance. And sometimes the screens would freeze. I think we had one time it was down for a whole week. So I kept ringing the helpline, and they would say it was they'd send an engineer out and it was BT's fault, and then BT would say it was their fault. In the end, it was water down the line. After a week, it was water in the line outside the shop.
What were you told to do when you had a shortage on a balance day by the
Put it
helpline?
in. Some of them would try and tell you to look for it, but quite quickly it started doubling. You know, when I was doing the final balance, it would double. The discrepancy would double. So I would ring them, and they would, if they told me to do it again, it would do it again. So I just didn't. In the end, just had to put the money in.
And how did you do that? Where did you find the money to?
It was usually out of my wages, just write a check or, yeah. They weren't massive, so I think there'd be 100 and something or.
You've just explained there were times when discrepancies would double. When did this happen?
That was fairly early on. At balance days, I told my area manager about it, and he came out November 2020, and I made him stand and watch me do every single press of the button, and I'd sort of say, right, I'm doing this, you agree with that, I'm pressing that, can you watch me? And it got to like the final balance, and I said, right, I'm pressing this button now, will you watch me? And I pressed it and it doubled, and he just had not a clue. And I never heard from him again really about it. He just didn't know.
You've referred to your area manager. Was that Kevin Duffy
Yeah.
at the time?
Yeah.
And you said he couldn't explain what was
He
causing
couldn't explain.
this
He saw it with his own eyes.
How much do you think you paid the post office to make good shortfalls that were shown on Horizon?
Well, apart from the one I was suspended for, you mean, or just...
In total, if you're able.
Oh, I don't know, maybe about 6,000 altogether.
The first audit of your branch took place before Horizon was introduced.
Yeah,
is
I
that
had
right?
2 audits in my time there before the last audit.
What was the outcome of that very first audit?
It was the same chap twice, and he was just really nice. He'd just send me like the report of the audit, and thank you very much for the tea and biscuits, and just little pointers that I might like to do.
So forgive me, that was 2 audits pre-Horizon.
2 audits
is that right?
pre-Horizon, yeah, and
both
very
didn't
friendly,
give rise
very-
to any problems.
No.
Your third audit was in early 2001, is that
Yeah,
right?
it was either January or February.
How did that audit come about?
I don't know. It's just like an audit. I didn't know they were looking for the amount they were. I hadn't a clue. So they just came one Thursday morning. But there were 2 carloads, and they just swung in because we had cobbles outside the shop. And for a moment I thought I was going to get robbed, because they came in like a Sweeney. So I was already a bit shaky when I opened the door to them. I could see they were officials when I opened the door. And there was 4 of them. And
Were these employees of the post office?
I think so, yeah, auditors. I don't know, I didn't even ask them. I just went through everything. I can remember sitting on a stool with my back against the radiator, because it's quite a big area, the office. And they just turned round and said that I was £4,000 short. And I thought they meant that I was £4,000 missing out of the safe. I just couldn't get my head around it.
Before the auditors arrived, did you know that you had a shortfall?
No, not like that, no. Not a clue. I mean, apart from the weekly ones, and I think we'd had a couple that had built up, and I'd had to ring up and say, I can't pay all this at once. So they put it in suspense, and they just waited to see if it would turn up. And
So you had reported
Yeah.
prior shortfalls?
Yes, I had.
To the post office?
Yes.
Was that via the helpline? Do you
Well,
recall?
it might have been Chesterfield, I can't remember, because it was 21 years ago, but I had reported it to say, I don't know where it is or what it is.
What action did the post office take when the shortfall of £4,000 was shown in your
They
branch?
suspended me on the spot. They just said, there's £4,000 missing, where is it? I said, if there was 4,000, I think I said, there's 4,000, if I'd taken £4,000, where is it? And they just sort of said, "Will you tell us?" And I was like, I couldn't just make sense of it at the time.
For how long were you suspended?
3 months.
And were you paid during the period of your suspension?
No.
Who took over running the branch?
My friend Lynn, who used to come in and help me with the twins when they were little, and she would like play with them while I did the shop. And she also, my mother became ill. My mother sort of helped me with the shop beforehand, and then she became ill, and she had life-changing surgery on her face, so we didn't see her anymore. So that's when I trained Lynn up to do the post office. So Lynn used to help me at the post office anyway. So as Lynn was there looking after the babies when the auditors came, they sort of signed her in then and there.
The post office launched an investigation into the cause of the £4,000 shortfall showing on Horizon. Is that right?
Yeah.
Do you know who was responsible for conducting that investigation?
I think it was, well, somebody told me it was Bill Earnshaw that had reported me, but I don't know how true that is. He was one of the area managers. I went to, they said I could take a friend, somebody or an NFSP representative, or I think it was illegal. Anyway, I went to see a solicitor in Harrogate, and I asked her to help me, but I had absolutely no paperwork as to why this shortage was. And she said how tricky they were to deal with, and she didn't think she'd be able to help me. And she said her exact words was, she said they behaved like the last bastion of the British Empire. She said, they won't give out any information. So I went for a NFSP rep, and I got invited to an interview in York Crown office. The office is above York Crown office. So I asked for the rep to go with me, and they said take relevant paperwork, and the only paperwork I had was like I got all my old bills from BT, and they were about that thick, and I'd just gone through them all with highlighters so they could see how many times I'd rung helpline, and that's all I had. And I was a bit naive. I thought he was going to have some paperwork there regarding my shortfalls and be able to sit down with me and go through them. So I got there, and he was just awful from right from the start. He was really aggressive, and he just had pieces of paper, and they just had numbers on them, and he kept saying, "How do you explain that? How do you explain that? Why have you done that?" And I was like, I just don't understand it, and I hadn't a clue. I hadn't a clue what I was looking at, to be honest. So.
And can you remember, was this an interview under caution, a formal interview, or was it something different from that?
I can't remember. He was an interviewer from the post office. I know that, but that's.
So it was after your suspension.
After suspension, there was a little time. And then he said they I think his words were, "You were invited to interview."
Right.
So I assumed it was just like.
Yeah. And you don't remember being cautioned?
I can't remember, to be honest. But I honestly thought we were going to sit down together and try and find the mistake. So I just started crying. It just made me cry right from the start because it was so awful. And I just kept looking at the rep for help, and he never opened his mouth once.
Was this? You said you'd approached the National Federation?
Yeah,
for
my local one was on holiday, so he came from. I don't know where he came from. He just didn't open his mouth once.
You've described being reduced to tears by the interview. How did it? Can you describe how it made you feel?
Just awful. Just because I kept looking at them, and he didn't believe me, and I knew he didn't believe me, but I knew I hadn't taken it. But I just, the more you say I haven't done it, it's just awful. It still is. It's awful.
The post office arranged a further meeting with you. I think it was 3 months after the audit. Is that right?
Yeah.
Where did this meeting take place?
I got the choice. I could go back to the office, or the Crown office, or he it could be a place of my choosing or back at my house. And I decided I wanted him at my house because I wanted to see him. I wanted him to see me as a person. I wanted him to see my children's paintings on the, you know, just instead of, I just wanted to have a little bit of control back and try and get him to see me as a human being instead of just, you know, just I don't know what.
Who attended that meeting on behalf of
It was the same chap that shouted at me in that interview.
You don't recall the individual's
I
name?
wish I could, no, I can't.
What were you told at that meeting?
I was told if I admitted to false accounting, because I think that the Helpline, I forgot to say, Helpline had told me to roll over, you know, like if it was in the one week when I couldn't pay. So I was told if I admitted to false accounting, they'd drop the theft charge and pay the £4,000 and they'd reinstate me, which they did. And I couldn't understand that if I was a thief 3 months ago, why was I fit to run a post office afterwards? No, I'm either a thief or I'm not. So it's like nothing happened after I was reinstated. And he was really nice to me when he came to my house. He was all smiley. He wished me well. It was really weird.
So the condition was you repay the money,
Yeah,
admit that you'd
admit to false
falsified
accounting.
accounts, and you
and
would
pay.
be reinstated to your branch.
Yeah, like nothing had happened.
And if you didn't admit the charge or repay the sum, what was?
I don't know. I didn't get that far. Just we had to keep the house. I needed my work to pay the mortgage, and 5 children. It was a lovely big house. I'm just so glad it was only 4,000 and not like everybody else's 65 or whatever, because we wouldn't have done it.
When you admitted to the false accounting, were you aware that other sub-postmasters were experiencing?
I hadn't a
problems
clue,
with
no,
the
but it was quite new, wasn't it then? I suppose it's right at the beginning of the Horizon. Oh, I do. One of the ladies in the village, she was house for duty, church, church lady. She worked in the post office in Acomb in York, and she was a friend. She used to come and have a coffee, and she said to me that exactly the same thing had happened to a lady in York. Was the first I'd heard about anything.
And when you say you admitted to the false accounting, how did that take place? Were you required to sign something to say that you didn't receive a criminal conviction, though?
No, nothing. Just like it never happened. As long as you pay your £4,000.
But just to follow up on what Ms. Hodge has asked you, you do remember signing something?
I'm pretty sure because I had everything until about 3 months before I heard about Nick Wallace and I burnt it all. But I'm pretty sure having a document that said that.
We have heard evidence from 1 or 2 people who signed what's called a caution. Does that ring any bells with you?
It might have been. I don't know. I was just
But you don't know.
The whole thing was so shocking. It's sort of.
All right, that's fine. That's fine.
But you then were reinstated in your branch. What happened to the £4,000 shortfall that I think you were asked to repay it?
Yeah,
is that right? How did you afford to do that?
We were doing the house up, and we just put a little bit of money away to do the house up. So that's what we used.
How did your appointment as a sub-postmistress come to an end?
I sold the business. And the lady that I sold it to had exactly the same problems.
When did you sell the business?
2008.
And why did you decide to do that?
Why did I?
Yeah, why ultimately did you decide
because it was just every balance day I would be absolutely stricken with it, like the thought of balancing. And it would affect sort of my whole day. I'd like dread it, and then I just didn't want to do it anymore.
Between your audit in early 2001 and your decision to resign, I think to resign in 2008, did you continue to experience shortfalls on horizon?
Yeah, nothing like it. That I mean, I still don't know where that £4,000 figure was, where it come from. Cause, yeah, there'd be like still 100 and something, but it would still double. The thing would still double at the end of the day when you press that final button. The amount would double, and it carried on for the lady that bought the post office. Exactly the same thing happened to her. So I think, yeah, she's was invited to join the claims for the postmasters as well. So she's in a different scheme, I think.
Did you join the Justice for Sub-Postmasters Alliance?
Yes, I'm one of the 5.
You're one of the 555. I'd like to, before we come on to that, I'd like to just ask you a few questions about how this experience affected you and your family. What effect did the shortfall shown by Horizon have on your finances?
We were just hand to mouth. It was one time Ian had to take the boys on holiday abroad, and I had to stay behind because we couldn't afford all of us to go, and the boys needed a holiday. We just didn't have any spending money. It was more what it did to me, what it did to me.
How did it affect you?
I felt really ashamed of myself. I didn't like going out, and I hadn't told anybody. There was the first time I said anything. I mean, the villagers don't know; they probably will now. But the first time I did anything about it was 18 years later, and it was when all the stories were coming out about all the other ones. And I woke up and I'd been crying in my sleep. And I got up, and it was when Nick Wallace was doing, started reporting on the stories, and I read somewhere, if you've got a story. So I woke up crying, and I went downstairs, and I just fired off an email. I don't think I said, when I looked at the clock, and it was 4 o'clock in the morning, and that was 18 years later. It's still, and post office was long gone, but it was still affecting me like that.
What has the long-term impact been on your emotional well-being?
I still sort of feel a bit ashamed, and I feel really inadequate that it happened to me. I'm a mess when it gets to cashing up at the charity shop. If it's out, there was one time it was £20 out, and I couldn't stop crying because it was happening again, and it was ridiculous because it was under the till. It slipped under the till, but it just makes me really anxious, like stuff like that.
How do you now feel about entering a post office, for example?
If I can help it, I won't go. I'll buy my stamps from W.H. Smith. I did have a small job afterwards, and it was mornings in the post office. It was a community post office, and it was lovely. I just did Tuesday mornings, but at the end of the Tuesday, you'd balance your money, which was fine because it wasn't like a balance. But I think I'd made a mistake, and it was my mistake in the morning on something, so it wouldn't balance, and I just couldn't stop crying. They were all fantastic, and I just left the job because I just couldn't cope. And I hadn't told them about me being suspended. It was just like this. I just too ashamed.
You've already described that the financial impact affected your family in that you weren't able to go on holidays with them. Can you describe a little bit more how your partner and your children were affected?
my mother, who was the postmistress before, and I said she'd had sort of a lot of surgery in her face. I was sort of her main carer, and she always wanted to know what was going on in the post office. And one of the worst things was I didn't ever tell her, because I didn't want to worry her, that I had been suspended. And it was like this massive secret. So much so that it was a bit of a relief when she died, because I didn't have to tell her. And that sounds dreadful, but I didn't have to lie, or I didn't have an awful secret anymore. And I'm really cross that they made me feel like that. The children, the little ones, weren't affected because we kept it from them. One of my middle sons, we were talking about it about 2 days ago, and he said that Ian, he said he remembers the time when Ian said we might have to sell, we might have to move house when he was little, and I didn't even know that Ian had had that conversation with them. They were all right, they did all right, but we made sure they were all right, but it was horrible.
You've mentioned that your mother was unwell. You said in your statement you would have wished to care and support her more than you could. Is that right?
Well, I was it was more the fact that I hadn't lied, I just didn't tell her, and it was just like, it was such a massive thing going on in my life, and we normally shared things, and I couldn't say, so much so that, when she died, it was, the secret went with her.
You've mentioned already that you were a claimant in the group litigation, is that right?
Yeah.
Did you receive any compensation?
£2,000 back, and then I think about 200 after that, a bit later.
£200?
Yeah,
right?
so 2,200 altogether.
Did this amount cover what you had to pay in to make good
No, nothing like.
How do you feel now about the way that you were treated by the post office?
I still can't get my head around it. It's just so incredible how they behaved. I'm starting to feel angry, but it's more like I just find it incredible that humans can treat other humans like that. It's beyond me.
What do you think should be done to put right what happened to you and other sub-postmasters?
That's in my last bit of statement. Can I do that?
Please.
When I was a child, I used to play post offices. They featured on cards, jigsaws, money boxes as part of a solid, reliable vision of Britain. I was proud to be a sub-postmistress, and I was trusted within the village, and it felt good to be useful. I sincerely hope that the post office can see from the impact statements just how much damage they've inflicted on ordinary people who were just trying to do a good job in a trusted institution. This is the first time I've spoken about what happened to me in 21 years, but I followed the harrowing stories of all the others for a long time. And just before I came here, the little village post office that I used to work in afterwards, I sent the lady an email because I didn't want to come here without telling her what, I felt bad that I hadn't said anything. So I sent her an email just to explain what was happening. And I was really sorry that I hadn't told her. And she sent me a lovely email back. And then just about half an hour before I've come in here, I've got another one from one of, because it's cooperative. So it just says, "Dear Jan, you may remember me. I followed you on from your," I won't say where it is, "on a Tuesday. I remember well your professionalism and your caring approach to the customers. We had no idea what you were going through. Although you were not able to talk about your circumstances, I'm glad you can take some comfort at being part of our happy band. We still are a happy band, and the shop goes from strength to strength. I just wanted to wish you all the best for the hearing at Leeds. It must be very traumatic, but I do hope you get the justice you deserve." And that was just before I came here. And to follow on, I just said, I wonder if the investigator who questioned me ever gave me a second thought, as I have never forgotten him. Yet I feel lucky that my shortfall was £4,000. It may well have been 200,000. I still didn't take it. I would like to see not a written apology of the lessons have been learned type, but I want to see the faces of the bullies who were complicit in this and hear the words coming from their mouths. I would like to see them punished financially, unlike us, for something they didn't do, but something they knowingly did. I would also like to see every person affected by the scandal get the financial redress to enable them to try and rebuild their lives. As it transpires, we didn't steal from the post office, they stole from us. Not just money, but livelihoods and futures. And then I just want to end with, I want to thank Nick Wallace and Alan Bates and everybody for helping me get to this place now. And thank you very much for listening. That's it.
And thank you for being prepared to come and tell me all this when you spent so much time not telling people. So I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Right, so we have one witness left this afternoon, so we'll have a short break, and then we'll assemble for our last witness.
Thank you, sir. Our next witness is Mr. Michael Fogerty.
I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, please.
Thank you.
As you know, Mr. Fogerty, my name is Catriona Hodge, and I ask questions on behalf of the inquiry. Please, can you state your full name?
Michael Patrick Fogerty.
You made a written statement for the inquiry on the 25th of January of this year, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Do you have a copy of that statement?
There is a
Before
copy
you-
in front of me, yes.
On the final page of that statement, you should be able to see your signature. Are you able to...
I've checked.
You have checked?
Yes, yeah, I've got the eyeball,
Super.
so yes,
Thank
I've checked.
Have you read the statement again since you made it in January of this year?
Yes,
Is the content of the statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
it is, yeah.
Your wife Diane's name is on the table in front of you as well.
Yes,
She was due to give evidence today, is that right?
she was, unfortunately, due to ill health. She's not able to attend.
Your wife Diane has also made a statement for the inquiry, is that right?
That is correct.
Is it correct to say that your and your wife's experiences are materially the same? That is to say, you both operated your post office together?
Very much so, though the impact on Diane, but as I'll explain later, was much greater than maybe myself in many respects.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Fogerty, a few questions about your background, please. Where did you grow up?
I grew up on the island of Jersey, in the Channel Islands.
And for how long did you live there?
The first time I left, I was 15 and a half. Brief time in the Merchant Navy on a small tramper. And then I ended up back in the island for about a year or so, and then you get restless. Once you've left, it's not the same. So I joined the army.
Which regiment did you serve?
The Royal Hampshire Regiment.
You met your wife Diane while serving in the army, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. We were serving in Everington Barracks in Londonderry at the time, and a decision was made to help us with manpower by bringing certain WRAC in to take over some roles that could free guys up to go out on the streets on patrol.
You've just mentioned the WRAC. Is that the Women's Royal Army Corps?
That's correct, yeah.
And is that where your wife was serving at the time?
She was part of that corps, but she had obviously different roles because you never sort of do the same thing in the army. When she came to our regiment, she was involved with the signals platoon, and part of her roles was to do the encryption of radios and stuff like that.
What qualities did you and your wife develop while serving in the army?
Can-do attitude, I suppose, is probably the big one. Resilience. Fight for what you believe, and sort of, I don't know, you just get on with it. Do you know what I mean? You can't, it's sort of, in the army or in the military, you can't sort of step back and say, I don't like this. You've just got to get on, focus on what you need to achieve and get on there. So she was very much a glass half full person, outgoing, confident, and capable, quite frankly.
For how long have you and your wife now been married?
A little over 20 years.
You have one daughter together, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
In 1990, you left the army and returned to Jersey, is that right?
That's correct.
Your wife Diane was pregnant with your daughter at that time.
Yes.
Is that correct? What did you do upon returning to Jersey?
The first job I had was as a funeral director. Well, in fact, technically I was still in the army because I'd been posted to the TA unit, which had recently formed in Jersey. And technically I was attached to them for my last 6 months. But they had their own permanent staff instructors, so they didn't really want me hanging around. So I was able to take up another role. And literally, I suppose, the day we arrived in Jersey, a company called Myards were advertising for a funeral director, and they wanted somebody, a mature person. So I went down and got the job, basically.
Did you later come to work for the police service in Jersey?
Yes, after about 3 years, because it was a family company, and I was always going to be sort of a junior employee, so to speak. And also, when you're dealing with grief all the time, it has an effect on on yourself. So the police were advertising for civilian support workers at the time, and because I had experience in communications and operations and stuff like that, I was able to secure a job in the control room as a cheap policeman, basically. So I'd use things like the police national computer and the local intelligence systems to answer, officers' questions over the radio and all that sort of stuff.
Did your wife return to work after your daughter was born?
Yes, she did. My mother was able to help looking out for Sam until she took ill. But Diane went back to work, and she was working for Barclays Bank International, basically looking after international clients and finance and God knows what else. I don't know much about that side of it, to be fair. We didn't really discuss work too much at home. We sort of got on with life, and that was it.
How did you and your wife Diane come to acquire a post office?
Diane's family are back here in the UK, but mainly, her mother's located back in West Yorkshire in Halifax. And her brother, who is also living in Queensbury. So after her father died, she felt the urge to come back to the UK, and I'm one of those, you pick me up, put me down, doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? So Jersey didn't hold any great attraction to me in terms of, oh, I had to stay there because that's where I was brought up. So I said to her, if we can find a suitable, way of earning a living back in the UK, I'm happy to move. And we did. One of the things that came up was the idea of maybe taking on a post office. And that's what led us eventually to take over the post office in Queensbury, which is where my wife grew up.
What attracted your wife in particular to the idea of owning a post office branch?
She always saw it as, it's like a pillar of the community type job, where people sort of took account, gave you a little bit of respect. I mean, we were responsible for signing documents for people's passport applications, things like that. So it was, and also she felt she could sort of bring it back into the community type of thing and make it a little bit more of a difference. Just a sort of example was she knew everybody in the village because she'd grown up there. And I remember there was a couple of ne'er-do-wells that lived not too far from the post office, and they were hanging around outside, and this little old lady come in for her pension, and she needed it. I think she'd saved up for about 4 or 5 weeks, you know what I mean? So she was actually carrying quite a lot of money, and I was dispatched as bodyguard to get that lady back home. That's the sort of thing that, she just tried to help people. She had a big heart. And, she was really enjoying it. And we took over. It was sort of paper-based for that first 4 or 5 weeks. And, it was great. And we were having, she was re-engaging with old friends and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it was all pretty positive to start with.
I believe you purchased the branch for £180,000.
That's
Is
correct.
that right?
Yeah.
And you made an investment in the stock as well. Is
Yes.
that right?
Yeah. I honestly can't remember figures. I'd have to sort of trawl through and see.
I think the figure in your statement for stock was £1,400. Does that
Yeah,
sound
that sounds about right. It was things like cards, sweets, pop, toys, that sort of thing.
How did you and your wife fund the purchase of the branch?
Well, basically, I took redundancy from the armed forces in 92. We'd used that money to help us buy a property in Jersey, which we subsequently renovated and extended. So when we sold that, we made enough money to get us established back in the UK, because you had to find, I think it was a third of the purchase price, if I remember correctly. So of the 180,000, we had to put 60,000, a minimum of 60,000 down of our own money.
And what made up the remainder?
Bank loan.
You were appointed as the sub-postmaster and moved into the branch in January of 2000, is that right?
Yes.
Did you and your family live in the premises?
No, we had a house just a little ways away.
You've described, I think, running the stock you've just described. Did you run a retail business from the premises as well?
Yes.
How large was the branch that you purchased?
Well, it was one of these, where you do the DVLA stuff. So people would come there for their car licences. So once a month, you'd have people queuing down the street for quite some distance, waiting to get in to change their car tax and so on. So it was it wasn't a particularly large premises, but it was quite a busy post office.
Did you employ staff to assist you in running the branch?
Yes.
How many?
There'd be Diane or myself plus 2.
Do you recall how much you received by way of salary from the post office?
This is going to sound terrible, but no, I can't. It's somewhere around between 40 and 50k mark.
What were your and your wife's hopes and aspirations for the business when you took it on?
I think basically, even though my name was as sub-postmaster, it was very much Diane's passion and her skills that were operating the branch. I'd never envisaged myself in that particular role long term, and so the idea was we'd always use that as a sort of stepping stone to doing other things, specifically me. She was looking to establish that as our main sort of the bedrock from which our children could grow up and so on, and we could then, pay off the house and all the rest of the things, and I would then find something else to follow, which eventually that's how it had to happen.
You've explained that the branch was paper-based when you first took over.
That's correct, yeah.
How did you find managing the accounts under the paper-based system?
Laborious, but actually relatively straightforward. So it was fairly easy to follow, once you were shown. It was just time-consuming because it was like, checking each docket and all the rest of it. So, yeah. But it wasn't rocket science. It was just being methodical, paying attention to detail, and making sure you follow, you follow that proper procedure.
Did you experience any unexplained shortfalls using the paper-based system?
No, because if we had one or two obviously little errors when we first started, but we found them, if you know what I mean. It's because two dockets had become stuck together or something like that. So you'd have to go back and go through everything and find it, and you could track down the problem. It was there in front of you to see, but nothing major. It's like, I don't know, whatever, say a £30 pension docket they'd stuck together when we were counting them, type of thing. So you'd look for that something else. You know what I mean? So you'd have to go back through all that stuff, find the error, and then you could eventually go to bed. It was one of those.
You've explained in your statement that the Horizon system was installed about 1 month after you took over. Does that sound about right? Yeah,
it was the hardware was already on the counters. It just wasn't being used when we moved in. So all the wiring and all that sort of stuff was all there. It was just waiting to be switched on.
And so about a month afterwards, it was switched on. Is that correct? What training did you receive from the post office before the system went live?
Very little, as I recall. There was some training. I honestly can't think of the duration of it. I can't remember. But I do remember going somewhere, and there was a number of people from different post offices, and we were sat round a table. We were going through some handouts that they were giving, which sort of took you through each stage. And there was like these projectors projecting on the wall and stuff, but it wasn't a PowerPoint. It was like slides type of thing. But it seemed, on the face of it, seemed relatively straightforward once you got your head around it. And so when it turned on, there was somebody came to the office, I can't remember who it was, and just stayed with us for a day whilst we sort of, because we'd all done our own individual sort of training, but we just stayed with us to oversee the initial thing and the shutdown at night. And after that, we were sort of left to fly on our own. You had the option of that call centre where you could, the help desk or something. As I say, if I'm honest, my recollection of that time is not great, because the impact was such that it was one of those, it was toxic, if that makes sense. So I put it in a box and I put it on the shelf and got on with my life. That's how I had to deal with it, because the repercussions of it were far beyond any of this, the shortfalls and things like that. The financial aspect was bad enough, but the rest that came after was the worst part of it all. It rocked my confidence really in the system.
I'll come shortly to the impact it had on you and in particular upon your wife. Before we do, you mentioned that, well, you've explained in your statement that your wife contacted your area manager shortly after your appointment. Is that correct? Do you recall that?
When we were struggling to get the thing to balance correctly, because you automatically assume that you're doing something wrong, don't you? And we were going through this, we'd proceed, she'd do it, I'd do it, and we were coming back and it was still not balancing. And sometimes it would balance different each time, it was just bizarre. And so we'd call help in. The thing was, if they didn't seem to figure out what it was, they just did something and sort of put the discrepancy to one side type of thing. And said, basically, it'll come right next time. But the next time it didn't come right, and of course you had to balance the book. So we ended up actually making up the shortfall so that everything balanced out. And we were doing that out of our own pocket, basically, without being told, because we couldn't see any other way. You know, because it's such a weird system. You're self-employed when it suits them, but they're slaves when it doesn't. That's a very sort of very bizarre way of operating the contract. But we didn't know any better, and you know, we come from a military background where you assume that the people who are sort of guiding you, giving you, you know, your guidance and what have you, that they're sort of looking after your interests, and they've got your interests at heart, because at the end of the day we're all working towards the same goal. But it became apparent, certainly in the latter part of that episode, that that wasn't the case at all.
You've explained that you had, in addition to your wife, there were two members of staff who assisted you in running the branch. Did there come a time where you came to suspect that they might be responsible for the shortfalls? Yeah,
and we had no choice. We were trying all sorts, right? My brother-in-law was, at that time, he was in security for one of the local stores, or, you know, Yorkshire thing, Wilkinson's. So he suggested we install cameras, and he came in and installed some pinhole cameras for us above each workstation to see if we could see anybody stealing money from the till, because we couldn't work out. Do you know what I mean? And the thing was, some of the people that came to work in the post office were friends of Diane's from years back, and we just didn't believe it. But at the same time, the things were piling up, and it wasn't me and it wasn't her. So who's dipping around in the till? And we were trying to find out if we could catch anybody out. You know, and it doesn't matter how close you might be or whatever, that kernel of doubt gets sown, and so everything becomes sour, yeah. Because then it became apparent that because we start asking questions and all the rest of it. What happened at this? What's this? La la. And of course, as soon as you bring out something on CCTV or anything like that, then people then thinking, well, you don't trust us, we don't want to work here, type of thing, you know. And then friendships get sour. You know, we would never do it again. We'd never work closely with friends. It just doesn't work. So it was a really sad time, to be honest. It was horrible. But, you know, you're in that situation and you're trying to make things work, and you're trying to understand what's going wrong. That was the thing. We could not for the life of us, understand. And the only thing you're left with is somebody's taking money from the till somehow. And of course, then you can't, you're trying to watch them like a hawk. And it's so we tried all sorts to see if there was anything going wrong, but we could get no evidence that anybody was taking anything.
The shortfalls you experienced initially were in relatively modest sums, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
In the order of £20 or £30.
yeah,
You've explained in your statement that they did increase over time. They came to be nearer to £100, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
yeah.
You've told us already you were required to make good these sums
That's
by
correct.
the post office. Is that right? What effect did using your own funds have upon you and your wife, covering these shortfalls shown on Horizon?
Well, eventually you start dipping, you have to dip into your savings and stuff that you're putting to one side for that next sort of venture and things. It wasn't at that sort of point, it wasn't breaking us financially because we had that income coming in every month, and we were able to cover the shortfalls. Also, Diane because of her local, a lot of local people knew her and stuff. The sales in the shop side of things had increased an awful lot since we took it over. So we had sufficient, and that's the thing. I couldn't understand why people would think we were trying to take money from the post office. We didn't need to. Do you know what I mean? We had enough to live on, and the implication of it was that somebody was stealing, but from our point of view, it wasn't us, so it had to be somebody else, because post office was saying, well, it can't be the system's right, nobody else is having any problems, that was their big one, nobody else, and we were quite isolated. We weren't really, there wasn't a big network of sub-postmasters and things like that. So we weren't told that other people were having problems. You know what I mean? They never mentioned that. So, as I say, Diane was operationally, she was there much more than I was, because I'd sort of gone off to work out in a different role. For a short time, and it was just as I sort of started in that element when things sort of, the time frame for me is a little bit vague, to be honest. As I say, I can't go. Ask me what happened last week. Yeah, I'm okay. 20 odd years ago, no, maybe not. But yeah, we were able to get through it. It was a bit tight at times because some of that money, it's sort of hard work to find it. You think you've worked, and then I think there was one incident. It just got to. I mean, there was like a £2,000 thing that and that was really the straw that broke the camel's back. I think, in that sense.
You've explained in your statement that your branch was audited in or around March 2001. Is that right?
Yeah. But they'd been out several, we'd had them out quite on a sort of regular basis when we were having saying this is not working properly. And they just really weren't that interested. They'd come and have a look, and that was it. Like, no, just, put the money in and that's it, basically. And then, as I say, I think, they came out in March to do this audit, and then that was it.
Before the audit was carried out, your wife had balanced the accounts, is that right?
That's right.
And she'd discovered a shortfall.
Yes, she had.
Was that the figure of £2,000 that you've mentioned?
Yeah.
You've explained that you had settled the sum before the audit took place, is that right?
Yes.
How did you do that?
We'd put a cheque for £2,000 to make that balance, and as I showed the post, you know, and that's how it was covered. So we had the money, you know, but I was saying to her, so this is getting ridiculous. And then they came out and did the audit.
You weren't present on the day of the audit, is
No.
that right? Was your wife permitted to supervise and observe what the auditors did?
I don't think she was. I think she had to. Well, she might have been allowed out in the shop bit, but she wasn't permitted to interfere with anything that they were doing. So, well, you know what a post office is like. You've got the post office area, you know, which is behind the anti-theft screens and all the rest of it, and we had the little shop area where all the cards and toys were. So technically, I suppose they couldn't kick her out of that, although I think she was asked to leave. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to go through the statement to remember. But I know I got a very distraught phone call, and then I made my way back to the office. But again, I wasn't allowed in to do anything, and it was a crazy system.
Were you ever shown any reports or findings of the auditors? You were suspended on completion of the audit, is that right?
That's right.
Did you receive any pay during your suspension?
Not from the point we were suspended, that was it. We didn't get any.
Do you recall for how long you were suspended?
I honestly can't remember. Months. It was months. It wasn't just a short time. Because I remember trying to fight it, you know. So we were invited to an interview after the suspension, and again, please, I can't honestly remember the time frame between. It was probably, you know, a week, maybe 10 days after, or 2 weeks, or a month. I honestly can't remember. We went down and we were interviewed by this chap, and I'd engaged a solicitor from Roe Cohen in Manchester to come and support us, because I thought I didn't know where this was going, and because the implication was that, you know, we were being charged with theft, basically. So, and we were given the impression that the chap interviewing us was like a police investigator, but worked for the he was appointed to work as like a post office investigator, but had the same sort of powers as a police officer. I didn't know any different. Do you know what I mean? So I really didn't think it was going to go anywhere. You know, I thought, I'll go down. We haven't done anything wrong, but it was, again, it just I was at a loss for words. We weren't, the solicitor, initially he wasn't allowed to come in with us. That was the first one. So we said, well, if he can't come in, we ain't coming in. So then they said, well, he can come in, but he can't say anything. So that was that. So I've got a guy sat there on, you know, God knows how many pounds an hour, not allowed actually to help represent us in any way, shape or form. People accusing us of things without any apparent evidence. And that was it. And they said, we will write to you, I think it was, and inform you of our decision. So they wrote and said, we're confirming your termination, and they give you a right to appeal. And I got in touch with the association, you know, with the representatives and all that. And I had to go all the way out to a lot further up north. A friend of mine drove me up, and they said, basically, you know, and it was like, yeah, well, yeah, you've obviously, they've obviously assumed that you've been stealing if you've got no evidence that you weren't. And I said, but you're supposed to, but there really wasn't any evidence. And it only became apparent years later that there were so many people going to these guys. They were fed up. They couldn't they couldn't defend people. There was no way for you. It was impossible to defend yourself. You couldn't get the documentation. They locked you out of everything. You know, at the end of the day, to maintain the post office, they gave you a list of people who they approved as temporary sort of substitute postmasters. So another postmaster from an Asian gentleman from Bradford came out, and he ran the post office. But he got the salary, and it was only after we'd had quite a bit of a fight with him, and you're on a bit of a hiding to nothing, but we had to get him to make sure he reimbursed us for anything that was sold through the shop, and to actually pay some rent on the property, because the property was ours. It was bizarre, you know. You're kicked out of the property, it's yours. Post office don't own it. But yet they can just they just steamrolled at us, and we didn't really know any better, to be honest. We weren't young, but we were quite naive. We'd had a sort of a fairly straight-laced life, I suppose, up to then, and certainly never encountered any sort of that sort of problem. And to be accused, it just puts you on the back foot. You just don't know where you go. So I did appeal, and I can't remember where it took place, but it was up the north of England somewhere, and there were two guys in the room, and unfortunately, I'll tell you what I did, you can take it or not. Because certain things I'd done in the military, I thought, right, I'll take my briefcase with me, and I installed a voice-activated recorder. So anyway, whilst I was there, I gave my version of events, explained the post office has never lost a penny because we'd always put the money back. I says, as is the case in this time, so I don't understand what the problem is. I said, you can't think we're stealing the money. If we were stealing the money, why would we put it back out of our own pocket? Yeah, so after I sort of said my piece, and then I was asked to leave the room, so I left the briefcase in there. And these two chaps talked about football, what they were doing at the weekend, playing golf, and that was it. Did not discuss the case one bit. So let's face it, I'd gone in there, a complete waste of time. It was already prejudged. And unfortunately, I can't bring that evidence into now because A, they didn't know they were being recorded, and B, it was 20 years ago and I've since lost the sound file. So it was at that point, that was it. You can't, where do you fight? You can't. We spoke to a solicitor, he said, you'd need tens of thousands of pounds if you want to try and fight this again. And it was at that point that I realised we couldn't fight, and we just had to go to plan B and get on with our lives. And that was pretty hard for me, from my point of view, that feeling of powerlessness. Never been like that in the past. It was the first time where I felt I actually couldn't. Everything was out of my control. Even though I wasn't responsible, as far as I was concerned, I wasn't responsible for anything. Neither was Diane, but it was totally out of our control. And our lives were suddenly at the behest of some smug, I won't say it, but supercilious prat that had never done anything in his life, probably, except lick a stamp. Then, accusing you of all sorts of crimes which you hadn't committed, and yet you couldn't fight back because they were the big team, and that team just steamrolled it through everybody, as it turns out, not just us, but many others. And many others lost much more than we did. Much more. Some of them their lives, which is it's crazy. The injustice of it is crazy. In this country.
What effect did the loss of your salary have upon your business?
It was, it just knocked us. You imagine, even if in this day and age, so when If you had a salary of 45 grand a year and suddenly somebody took it away from you, you're still not going to find it easier to get on. So go back 20 years and imagine where we were. We were lucky in the sense that I had my father. He's not one of your Jersey millionaires. He was a welder, but he had some money put to one side, and he was able to help us out to get through the worst of it. Then I was able to get another job, and money started to come in. Once we sorted out, but we got a pittance for the rent of the post office and all the rest of it. But again, there was no point to argue. It was either that or shut it down. And right up until the end, of course, I was still thinking that I'd be able to appeal this. And I thought, well, justice will prevail in the end, because there was nothing. We hadn't done anything. But that wasn't the case. But it was some months before it went from being suspended to the appeals process. So during that time, financially, things were very tight, because we still had a mortgage to pay, we had the bank to pay back and all the rest of it. So we were left at the end with no option but to sell the post office. Of course, the problem was there that we couldn't sell. Everybody knew what had happened, and there was at one point, for some reason, I don't know how this got, well, I do know how it got back into the village, but one of these manager chaps had told another post mistress, not far from us, I won't say which one it was, that we'd stolen £100,000 from the post office, right? Now, it was like the Bush Telegraph, yeah? It was in the village, and people were thinking, to this day, people still think that we'd stolen £100,000, as if, they'd have let us walk if we'd have done that. But that's what was, the sort of thing that was going around. There was all sorts of rumours. And that's what got to Di more than anything else. It wasn't a financial thing. It was the friends were saying, well, you must have nicked it, because otherwise they wouldn't have kicked you out of the post office. And that's how it was. And it didn't matter what you said, because everybody thought, no, well, the post office is this shining beacon of British society. It's been there for years. It's, staple of the community, la, la, la. Unfortunately, they didn't realise the sort of people that were working at the post office, for the management of the post office at that time. You were accused, guilty, regardless. You were guilty, and that was it. And luckily, as I say, the families rallied round to help us through that initial difficult time. And, without them, things would have ended up much worse. We've bounced back. We put it behind us and we've bounced back, and so be it. And the thing is, if we were dishonest, we wouldn't be where we are now. That's the crazy bit of it. And I'm not angry. I'm angry about being powerless to bring the people, to account that actually force this upon us. And I don't know. There's no point in going on. I've heard it today, and there's people out there who've had. It's horrendous, the impact it's had on their lives. I think, all I could do was say, right, that's it. It's behind us. We've got to get on. We can't look back all the time. We need to focus and get ourselves out of this. And that's where my mindset was. And so I just sort of shut the box, put it on the shelf, and got on with my life. And because otherwise we'd have just, you sort of mope about saying, it's crap, life's shit. No, well, excuse my French.
I've heard worse.
But all of it. So I was able to, I suppose I was just a little bit older, a little bit more resilient maybe. I suppose the biggest shock to me was the effect it had on Diane.
I'd like to ask you a little bit more about how it affected your wife, because she was not able to come and give evidence today. What impact did the rumours you mentioned have upon your wife's relationship with her family?
Well, like I said, initially the family helped us out, but when that rumour got back into the village about this £100,000 thing, the sort of, they believed it almost. Do you know what I mean? There was that element of, it was like that seed had been sown, because really they didn't know that much about me, because I wasn't a villager. I'd come from outside, that foreign country over the channel, and I suppose there was that element of, oh, did they or didn't they? And it, then comments get made, and you know what it's like with families. Once the shutter comes down, that's it. The bat and ball's taken home. So there were fallouts with the family, because Diane's a very, very loyal person. She won't, she stands by people to the death, basically. And the fact that people would doubt her was the most damaging thing to her. And her friends were cutting her off. The family were, basically distancing themselves from it, because they were still associated with the village. They didn't want to be associated with us. And there was lots of tittle-tattle. The only time people would talk to you, it was as if they wanted to just see if they could get information from. So when you told them it was absolute rubbish, that wasn't what they wanted to hear, if that makes sense. They just wanted to sort of try and get some more dirt. And it took its toll on her very badly, to be honest. And I think the biggest, one of the other things that was really got up my craw was our daughter we'd spent a lot of time teaching her to read. So she was flying at school. And as a result, she was actually like having to go into classes like a year up at some points to do certain things, because she was at that stage. And then she started getting the comments, because kids are terrible. They overhear half a conversation between parents. So then Sam was coming home in tears. Diane would then get into tears and angry, and then powerless to do anything about it. And the school, at the end of the day, regardless of what the teachers want, they weren't going to. You can't stop the kids in the playground, and all of that stuff going on. Your mum's a thief, your dad's a thief, la la la. So that resulted in us saying, right, that's it. So we took her out of that school and moved her to a different school, primary school. And then luckily it hadn't done too much lasting damage, I suppose, because she went on to grammar school, got herself into grammar, and then university, and she's living her life. But at that time it did affect her, and she wasn't a crybaby, but it's relentless, is what it is. It's relentless. So we had to sort of put some distance between her and her friends, people that she'd made friends with. She'd sort of go to the rugby, girls' rugby, and all that all that came to an end. So it was like we'd been back in the UK since 2000, and then by the end of 2001, it was like we'd never arrived. We had to reset and start all over again, but in a much worse position than we were when we first arrived, unfortunately.
Have you and your wife sought any compensation from the post office?
We didn't. We didn't even think about the post office until the group, the 555 group, got together, and we either read something or we were contacted by probably one of the other sub postmasters knew what had happened to us and put two and two together. Anyway, they got in touch with us, and we joined that group, and we have received a small amount of compensation as a result of that action, yes.
Does that cover the losses and the harm
No.
that you suffered?
No, because it probably would have been better, but you're all aware of exactly how that balanced out, because some obviously wealthy people had to put money up to cover the expense of taking the post office to court, because they were effectively fighting the government, who have got the biggest chequebook in the world. And they were trying to use that chequebook to beat us down, basically, and that's what it was at the beginning. You know, I couldn't fight them as an individual. You couldn't afford it. You know, even people like Branson would think twice before taking on that sort of organisation. So when we got in touch with that group, they asked us for statements, and that's what we did. We put statements in. And it took its course, and Horizon was found, proved to be a load of crap, and it went from there. And of course, the bulk of that money that was allocated as compensation went to the people that were funding the legal action, and so the sub postmasters saw very little of that, really, in comparison.
Can you confirm how much you received?
Oh God, I'm hopeless with this. I'd say somewhere around I think it's somewhere around 28,000. Might have been slightly more. I'd have to. I don't, honestly, terrible with figures, but yeah, it was certainly no less than 28,000 and no more than 32 thereabouts. Because it came through in two lumps. That's why I'm hesitating to say. I think in total it was about £30,000 thereabouts.
How do you now feel about the way that you and your wife were treated by the post office?
Appalled. Who do I direct it at? I don't know. This is the only way we're ever going to see any justice, is the fact that it's got to this point. My wife went through about 2 years where she wasn't the woman I married. How the marriage survived is, it was just, we had to work at it. We really had to work at it, because financial pressures, the being shunned by your friends, it didn't have that impact on me, because, who did I know in the village? I'd known them as acquaintances, There was one friend that stuck with us throughout this, and he eventually helped. It was about 2.5 years after all of this, and he sort of, Diane started understudying him as a property developer, basically, and subsequently she went on, and that's what she does for a living now. But that period of 2 to 3 years, 4 years, it's hard for me to remember, because, to be honest, if you break your arm and things like that, when you get injured, you just put it to one side. It's very hard to actually recall the amount of pain and everything else that went on at the time. And that's how I feel about this period of my life. I've put it behind me. It's like things in the army that happened. Yeah, I know they happened, but the repercussions of it, no, not so much, because if you did, you'd never get up and walk out the gate again. So you tend to put things to one side. That side of it was okay, but Diane couldn't do that, because it wasn't that physical trauma. It was emotional, because of her family and her friends, and the effect on our daughter. And she was in bed, she'd sort of stay in bed for days. She wouldn't leave the house, all of that sort of stuff. And that went on for 18 months, 2 years. And then eventually she sort of got a grip of it, and worked her way out and started to pick up the pieces, really. And then after that, well, you know, we both knuckled down and got on with life, and that's where we are now, basically. And I'm here today because I feel I can't believe that something like this would happen in this country. But then I realised that actually it can happen, and it has happened. And there seems little recourse without this sort of body to pick it apart and see what went wrong. And it's just been a massive cover-up by the post office, or attempted cover-up. It's been blown open now, but at the time, you know, people were covering it up. And the thing was, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, these people that were coming out, these auditors, these managers, area managers, must have known that something was wrong. Because you don't suddenly have hundreds of sub-postmasters and sub-postmistresses stealing money. That's never happened before. But suddenly, it's like, it's like a COVID-19 series of bouncing through all the post office system, that suddenly all these people that work for the post office, but don't, they actually work for themselves, are suddenly starting to steal post office's money. Absolutely ludicrous. But because they kept us all separated, we didn't know. I didn't know of anybody else at the time that had been affected in this way. It was only after, and we're going back 15 years later, that it came out that the Horizon system was faulty. And you only need a little bit of code in one of those systems, you know. And it wasn't that we were dummies. You know, we both run successful businesses now, so we know what it's about. And I just hope that the people whose lives it affected much more than ours, because I think we were sort of young enough and resilient enough eventually to bounce back from this. There's a hell of a lot of people out there who couldn't. They didn't have the resources to bounce back from it. And it's horrendous. It's horrendous. And sadly, the things that are going on in the world now are going to overshadow this inquiry. And I hope, you know, that you, Sir Wyn, don't allow it to be overshadowed, and you know, you get justice for the people that deserve it, because, you know, I mean, what happens to the people that have died? You know, crazy.
I've no further questions for you, Mr. Fogerty. Is there anything
I've
else
got
you'd like to say?
just one statement, just one appeal I'd like to make, basically. And please excuse me if I stutter a little bit, because it's not easy to read, but I had to write it down. Just as an historical point, really, more than anything else. Back in 1945, 1946, the statement, "I was only doing my duty and following orders," was not considered a defence at the Nuremberg trials, and neither should it be here. On accountability, none of the people who implemented this feudal treatment of sub-postmasters and mistresses has been held to account. And they will have taken this toxic cancer, like management culture, with them into other organisations and risen up through those organisations to this day. I would ask the Chair to seriously consider this point in his deliberations, and bring pressure on those responsible to explain their actions. Thank you, Sir Wyn.
And thank you, Mr. Fogerty, for coming here to give your evidence to me. And a particular part of my thanks relates to your willingness to explain things so vividly in relation to the impact on your wife, who can't be here. So I'm very grateful that you've done it for both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And on a very technical point, Mr. Enright, given that we've had such a vivid description of Mrs. Fogerty's position, for my part, I don't require a summary, given that we've had a witness statement and now this vivid oral testimony from Mr. Fogerty. So that concludes today's business. Yes, Ms. Hodge. So 10 o'clock in the morning, everyone? All right, see you then.